No, now it's on? Okay, are we good? Can we go? Can we roll? All right, good afternoon. At 2 p.m., there will be a briefing here sponsored by the Permanent Mission of Austria to the United Nations entitled Norwegians, People's Aid, and the Federation of American Scientists, presenting the status of the world's nuclear arsenals at the beginning of 2025, as well as the most recent findings of their nuclear weapons ban monitor. Our Secretary General is about to depart Cairo and making his way back to New York City. Earlier today, as you know, he spoke at the extraordinary Arab summit held in Cairo, and the summit was, of course, on Gaza. In his remarks, he welcomed the Arab-led initiative to mobilize support for Gaza's reconstruction, saying that we stand ready to fully cooperate with this endeavor. He said we need a clear political framework that lays the foundation for Gaza's recovery, for its reconstruction, and for its lasting stability. The Secretary General recognizes that reconstruction requires governance and security arrangements that can help guarantee a brighter, more stable future in the region. Also, for the record, he issued a similar message to the launching of the Berlin Initiative, and that video was made available and text to you as well. The Secretary General, in his remarks in Cairo, also warned against any resumption of hostilities. He reminded all parties of the meaningful improvement with the with the ceasefire and the hostage deal we witnessed in the past weeks. Palestinian civilians in Gaza have experienced reprieve, hostages were released, and humanitarian aid increased. As you saw in the readout we issued yesterday of his meeting, the Secretary General's meeting with Ahmad Shah of Syria, they exchanged views about the historic opportunities to chart a new course for Syria, as well as the challenges facing the country. While in Cairo, the Secretary General also held a number of discussions with other leaders and officials. He met with the President of Lebanon, Joseph Aoun, during which, no surprise, they discussed developments in Lebanon and the importance of the full implementation of Security Council Resolution 1701. He also met with João Lourenço, the President of the Republic of Angola and the current President of the African Union. They discussed developments in Africa, notably in Sudan, and about the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Also want to flag that the Secretary General issued a video message to the Tokyo conference, whose theme is international cooperation and the restoration of peace on the 80th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations. In his remarks, he said, as we prepare to mark the 80th anniversary of the devastation of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we will continue to be guided by the inspiring example and vision of the hibakusha for a world free of nuclear weapons. Mr. Guterres also encouraged participants to advance the objectives of the Pact of the future and drive multilateralism into the future. The full message was shared with you. And I want to share with you a press release which you may have seen or you may have missed, but is worth reading, and it is from UNICEF in Sudan, and it is just horrendous. As UNICEF today warned that millions of children in Sudan are at risk of rape and other forms of sexual violence, which is being used as a tactic of war. According to UNICEF, armed men are raping and sexually assaulting children, including infants as young as 1, amid the nationwide conflict which is rippling through the country. No area of Sudan is immune from these horrendous crimes. UNICEF said that data compiled by gender-based violence service providers in Sudan shows that 221 cases of rape against children were recorded since the beginning of 2024. UNICEF pointed out that these figures represent only a small fraction of total cases. We, of course, join Catherine Russell, the executive director of UNICEF, in stressing that this is an abhorrent violation of international law and could constitute a war crime, and it must stop. UNICEF is working in partnerships to establish safe spaces that provide gender-based violence services for survivors, as well as integrating these into health services at health centers and mobile clinics, and providing relevant medical supplies to the victims. Turning to the situation in the occupied Palestinian territory, the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tells us that the crossings into Gaza, Karim Shalom, Zikim, and Erez remain closed for cargo for the third consecutive day. OCHA says the Israeli authorities have rejected our attempts to collect humanitarian supplies that cross the Karim Shalom border crossing before its closure. Given the huge needs in Gaza, keeping the crossings closed will have devastating consequences for a population that has just begun to recover from months of deprivation and hunger. It is critical that member states and those with influence use all available means to ensure that the ceasefire holds. Philippe Lazzarini, the Commissioner General of UNRWA, said today that the decision of Israel to stop aid into Gaza threatens the lives of civilians exhausted by 16 months of brutal war. He said that humanitarian aid must continue to flow at scale, similar to what we'd seen over the past 6 weeks when the ceasefire began. Despite recent developments, we and our humanitarian partners on the ground are doing all we can to sustain operations across the Gaza Strip. Yesterday in Gaza City, the dialysis unit of the Al-Rantisi Children's Hospital resumed services along with operation of the 25-bed inpatient unit. Meanwhile, the Indonesian hospital in North Gaza, pediatric services resumed yesterday. For its part, our colleagues at the World Health Organization report that today 29 child patients were evacuated from Gaza to Jordan via Israel for specialized medical treatment, along with 43 of companions. This was the first WHO-supported medical evacuation to Jordan since the ceasefire began. Inside the Gaza Strip, the World Health Organization tells us it has provided hygiene and sanitation support to meet the needs of thousands of women and girls. WHO warns that the lack of water and sanitation threatens the health and dignity and survival of women and girls, increasing anxiety and stress levels and deepening the mental health crisis for those who've been displaced. A quick correction to our note from Gaza yesterday. Our humanitarian partners tell us that following the closure of the crossings into Gaza, flour and vegetable prices increased by more than 100% in some cases, not 100-fold, as I was told to say. Turning to the West Bank, Israeli forces operations in Jenin refugee camp continued and expanded to the eastern part of Jenin city, resulting in more deaths, destruction, and displacement. Israeli forces ordered residents of this part of Jenin city to evacuate their homes, displacing about 30 families, including at least 3 who've been displaced previously. During the operation, Israeli forces used bulldozers, damaging infrastructure and causing power outages. Intensifying access and movement restrictions to and from the city were also recorded. And turning to Syria, Geir Pedersen, a special envoy for Syria, strongly condemns Israel's ongoing military escalations in the country, including the airstrikes we've seen. He remains deeply concerned by the continued violation of the 1974 Disengagement of Forces Agreement. Such actions, he said, are unacceptable and risk further destabilizing an already fragile situation. The special envoy calls on Israel to cease violations and uphold its international obligations and refrain from unilateral measures that exacerbate conflict. He urges all parties to respect Syria's sovereignty, its unity, its independence, and of course its territorial integrity. His full statement is online. Meanwhile, our humanitarian colleagues welcome the extension by the caretaker authorities in Damascus for the UN to continue delivering assistance through the Bab al-Salam and Al-Ray crossings for an additional 6 months until September 3rd of this year. Bab al-Salam and Al-Ray provide direct routes to Aleppo, where some 4 million people need assistance. We also continue to use these crossings to conduct cross-border humanitarian missions, to monitor projects, carry out assessments, and engage with our partners and with local communities. Since the start of 2025, more than 520 trucks carrying UN aid, including food, health, and other critical supplies, have crossed from Turkey through 2 border crossing points, as well as through the Bab al-Hawa crossing, marking a substantial increase compared to the same period last year. This afternoon, nearly 24 trucks carrying 300 metric tons of WFP food, enough for 174,000 people, as well as agricultural supplies from the Food and Agriculture Organization, crossed from Turkey to Syria through Bab al-Hawa. Turning to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, our peacekeeping colleagues are telling us the situation around Goma remains highly unstable. The M23 continue to consolidate its control in the city with checkpoints and with patrols they're running. And this, our colleague says, continues to restrict the peacekeepers' freedom of movement and access to the airport in Goma. In the province of Ituri, the peacekeepers continue to fulfill their mandate to protect civilians. Patrol was deployed to the Pimbo and Jugu territory following an attack by a member of the Codeco armed group in the area. Additionally, the mission has sent a patrol to Matate, northeast of Bunia, in response to an attack by suspected members of the Zaire militia, which resulted in 2 civilians being killed and 1 injured. And on the humanitarian end, Bruno Lemarquis, our resident coordinator and humanitarian coordinator for the DRC, has expressed deep concern over the recent increase in targeted violence against civilians, including humanitarian workers, as well as civilian infrastructure in the eastern part of the country. In a statement, Mr. Lemarquis stressed that these attacks, including the abduction of dozens of patients from 2 hospitals that we reported to you yesterday, are serious violations of international law and human rights law. They also pose a direct threat to humanitarian operations, providing relief to millions of civilians in need based on the principles of neutrality, impartiality, and independence. We echo Mr. Lemarquis' call on all parties to meet their obligations under international humanitarian law and the protection of civilians, including aid workers, as well as civilian infrastructure. Meanwhile, our OCHA colleagues tell us that a spike in cholera cases in Uvira, some 130 kilometers south of Bukavu in the east. Our partners are working in health, are concerned about risks of the disease spreading among communities. Some 25,000 people have fled to Uvira since mid-February, and the city is facing water shortages and limited facilities to treat cholera. In Ituri, in the northern part of North Kivu, local authorities report more than 16,000 human beings have fled clashes in the Jugu territory since February 27th. In recent weeks, the area has seen an escalation in clashes and attacks by armed groups, resulting in civilian casualties and displacement. For its part, UNHCR issued a new position today on the return to the eastern part of the DRC. They say Congolese nationals fleeing the conflict, as well as those outside the country who originate from the area affected by the country, may need refugee protection under international and regional legal frameworks. Close to 80,000 men, women, and children have fled to neighboring countries, including 61,000 who arrived in Burundi since January. Around Goma, about 17,000 people remain in displacement sites, schools, and churches, while 414,000 people have been on the move for the past 4 weeks, encouraged by the de facto authorities to return to their villages of origin. At least 209,000 people from these sites have arrived spontaneously in Masisi, Nyiragongo, and Rutshuru territories, where basic services are not equipped for a sudden surge of influx of people. Given the widespread insecurity in these provinces and surrounding areas, many more may need to cross border and to find protection and assistance. UNHCR calls on states to register all asylum seekers from the DRC and provide them with documentation. A quick update from our peacekeeping force in Abyei. They tell us they're currently investigating an incident. Currently investigating an incident which took place over the weekend, in which a peacekeeping logistics convoy from UNISFA traveling from Abyei to the Joint Border Verification Monitoring Mechanism headquarters in Kadugli in Sudan was halted by soldiers from the Rapid Support Forces north of the Abyei boundary. On Saturday, the RSF forcefully removed a number of UN personnel and civilian drivers from the convoy before returning them yesterday morning. Fuel trucks were also seized. The safety and security of UN personnel and our contractors is a top priority. We, of course, strongly condemn this incident. The Secretary General recalls that attacking and targeting UN peacekeepers may constitute war crimes under international law. UNISFA remains committed to delivering on its mandate and ensuring stability in the area. And in Uganda, our country team there launched a joint emergency appeal to raise $11.2 million to support Uganda's Ebola response efforts, and that should cover us for the next 3 months. As of March 3rd, there were 10 confirmed cases of Ebola and 2 deaths. A total of 299 contracts have so far been listed since the first phase was identified in January. UN agencies and NGOs have already mobilized 4.6 million by repurposing available resources. 3 countries paid up. Oh, and Beto wakes up. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I can repeat. 3 new contributors to regular budget. All 3 have striking geographical contrast. One is known for its ancient Inca ruins and Amazon rainforest. Bingo. The other boasts tropical beaches, vibrant coral life, and volcanic landscape. And it's a different part of the world. It's a beautiful. Mauritius. Okay. That was hard. Okay, yeah. And the third is known for its desert and ancient Silk Road cities. Central Asia. Paul-Louis and Tashkent. Do you want to go ahead and ask questions?
So we are in a which were announced.
Sorry. Yeah. As we already in a low growth context. On the rise. Point that most ability and provides certainty for the global economy.
I also observed that the tone internationally changes.
wait, it's a routing problem. I know, why don't you share, you can share a story, Ben.
I can hear you.
Okay.
Stéphane, do you have a way to call into the Zoom? Like through your phone? Because then I think we can get your audio for your phone.
So, are you hearing me now? Okay, but should I try to call in through the Zoom? Do we think this is going to stay? But, yeah, your colleague here is giving me the worried eyes. All right. Brigitte, okay, you know what? You're not going to get me on, you can get me on a lot of stuff, but not on Sound of Music trivia. Yeah, yeah. All right, let's start again from the top. Scene 3, Act 1, Scene 3. Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about the U.S. reinstating the FTO
Yeah.
foreign terrorist designation on the Houthis. Last time in 2021, I believe there was concerns from the UN about its impact on humanitarians. Could you tell us?
Yeah, I mean, we've
now?
seen the decision taken by the U.S., which is a decision by the U.S. It's a bilateral decision. I think at minimum, a designation like this must be coupled with appropriate safeguards and reassurances, both humanitarian assistance and the ability of civilians to commercially access central goods and services. Our focus is on the humanitarian situation. I mean, all of this, our job remains to save lives. We hope that we'll be able to continue our life-saving activities. And of course, as I mentioned, that civilians will be able to access the private sector, because for humanitarian goods, a lot of it comes in through the private sector. If this is not possible, it will have devastating humanitarian impact on populations that are already very vulnerable. I mean, as 19 million people in Yemen need life-saving assistance, and 17 million people risk of being hungry. And Yemen, as you well know, imports, I think, about 90% of its food.
Could I just ask one more on DRC? Have you had any more information on this charter that the M23 and some allied groups signed in Kenya about these parallel administrations?
The M23?
It was
No.
DRC, right? They
No,
signed
I
in
mean,
Kenya?
there was, I think you may, I
mixing it
hate to
up?
correct you, but I
Am I
think you're
mixing-
talking about the RSF in Sudan,
Oh,
which we
yeah, I am. Okay.
commented
All right.
at
Do you have
length
any?
last week. We commented
Do
at
well,
length.
then we'll make a quick save.
We commented at length last week, and you...
But do you have anything new on?
No, not since it was announced
Okay.
last week.
All
Yeah.
right. Thank you.
Okay.
Too many groups.
Yes. Gabriel.
Thank you, Steph. On the readout from the Secretary General's meeting with Mr. al-Sharaa in Cairo, does the Secretary General still think that all sanctions should be dropped against Syria in order for the country to move forward?
Look, I don't think... what the Secretary General, I think his message was one about of inclusivity as the caretaker authorities move forward on rebuilding the state, and he does believe that member states and groups of member states need to look at lessening the pressure on the Syrian economy by removing a number of sanctions.
And on the Secretary General's remarks in Cairo, he said there can be no recovery without an end to the occupation. Can you flesh that out a little bit more of how he plans or how he would anticipate that pathway actually happening?
Well, I mean, the pathway to the end of occupation is a pathway to a two-state solution. I mean, we're seeing the impact of the occupation on a daily basis in the West Bank. We're seeing it. We continue to see it in Gaza. Madame.
Thanks, Steph. Maggie, actually, you asked my question. You didn't know, but I was going to ask you on RDC first. We've heard that M23 is installing its own administration. So are MONUSCO authorities talking with M23, and who is talking for the UN? Is it Bintou Keita? Is it authorities, local?
We have, like anywhere else, right, that we operate, when there is a de facto change on the ground of who controls an area, what a group controls a town, we have to talk to them in order to get our work done, right? So there are dialogues going on from the humanitarian standpoint. There are obviously contacts on the peacekeeping standpoint done locally. And again, whether it's the M23 or any other group that is a de facto authority, it doesn't convey recognition. It doesn't mean there's a political acceptance. It's just we need to talk to the people who control a territory just to get our work done, or at least try to fulfill our mandate. As we see, the M23 is now facilitating, or should I say is hindering, the work of the peacekeeping mission in the areas that it controls.
Totally get it. So are the MONUSCO authorities talking to M23 or also to some Rwanda
It's
authorities?
not, we're not, Bintou Keita and our special envoy for the Great Lakes are speaking to all sorts of stakeholders to try to find a political solution, right? And that's what needs to be done. When I'm talking about the contacts locally, they're there just to make sure that day to day we can either get our work done or try to get our work done.
And another question, sorry, on more on the UN, because Elon Musk, you've heard about that plan from that senator of Utah, Mike Lee, with the plan for the US to leave the UN. Elon Musk tweeted this weekend that he agreed up with the idea. Is it an idea that has ever been floated around in the past 80 years, that the US could leave the UN?
I think that is an amazing research question for a journalist to look at. Let's go to Stefano, and then I'll come back. Mr. Vaccaro, do you have a question? Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Stéphane. I don't know if it was asked because I couldn't hear the second
Tons of questions were asked and great answers were given while you were away.
No.
Even Yvonne thinks so.
I'm talking about Benno questions about the tariffs. Well, in what Trudeau said also during the press conference, he said he doesn't believe that the reason why Trump is doing this is because of drugs or migrants question, but it's because he wants to annex Canada. That's what Trudeau says. So what my question is, what the Secretary General think? Does he think too that the reason could be something like that he wants the U.S. government to want really to annex Canada?
Look, I'm not a whisperer of the thinking behind the policies of heads of states of government. I mean, I think that's a question you need to ask in Washington.
Well,
Benno.
but at least this, if there is, again, for example, President Trump is going to speak tonight, if he's going to reaffirm his wish or intention that Canada should become the 51st state of the United States, should we expect that there would be a reaction by the Secretary General?
We believe in, and this is not a new policy, Stefano, we believe that all member states need to respect the territorial integrity of other member states. Gisella's son.
About the UN conference to review the treaty on the prohibition of
Yeah.
nuclear weapons. Germany is not participating, and the German Foreign Office told DPA the treaty dates back to a time before the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine. The intention and ambition of the treaty no longer reflects the current security reality on the ground, or something like this. What do you have a message to Germany in times like these, taking a position like this?
Look, the Secretary General, I think, has been very clear in his call for member states to move towards a complete denuclearization and the abolishment of the nuclear weapons. Our basic policy is that member states, all member states, should be at the table to come up with a treaty on any topic and be part of the discussion.
But if many countries which have the most nuclear weapons are not willing to give them up, should others go on with
I would refer you
denuclearization?
to the extensive body of words from the Secretary General on nuclear weapons. Deji.
Yes, first, does the UN have any comments on the decision by the Trump administration to suspend military aid to Ukraine?
Look, I think we've been asked before when weapons were shipped. So whether weapons are not shipped or not shipped, our position remains the same, is that the Secretary General feels an urgent need for a just and sustainable and comprehensive peace in the conflict in Ukraine, in line with, and we'll say it again, General Assembly resolutions, the territorial integrity of Ukraine and international law, and the Charter of these United Nations, to which 193 member states have signed on to. Any other questions? Yes, Abdelhamid, thank you. Abdelhamid, I can't hear you. I can hear you, Benno, though. No, it's okay. Abdelhamid, you want to try again? No? Okay. Deji, yes.
Yes, actually. Another question about nuclear. It's been reported that Russia might facilitate a U.S.-Iran nuclear talk. What does the UN see this development on the nuclear
Listen,
issue
I'm not
Iran?
gonna comment on hypotheticals and so on. I think our position on the JCPOA and Iran's obligations regarding nuclear material and nuclear weapons is oft repeated. Thank you all.